James Worthington walked into his newly furnished house with the brightest smile on his face, proud at the prospect that he was finally a homeowner who'd put a permanent roof over his family's head. He couldn't stop gazing at the beautiful house in disbelief, at its brand new paint smell and unwalked floors. With his wife Natalie in one arm and son Mark in the other, James felt like the luckiest man alive. "Baby," his wife chuckled. "I love it. I finally get my own room now, Daddy." Mark beamed. James looked at him proudly, happy that his child was getting the childhood he never had, that too in the posh town of Oakville. That afternoon, as they ate lunch in their brand new sitting area, Natalie remarked something odd about the neighborhood. "Honey, the houses on this street are all deserted. There isn't a single person living next to us. It's a brand new living area, babe," James said, putting another dollop of mashed potatoes into his plate. "Don't worry, plenty of people will come once they see how gorgeous and affordable these houses are." Natalie chewed her steak thoughtfully, another slightly odd thing on her mind. "The realtor called today. He said he'd be here at 9. 9, James remarked. "That's a late hour, eh? And what for?" "Exactly, James," she said. "What for?" "He said he had to tell us something important." It sounded plenty shady. Probably for some payment stuff, Nat. Don't worry too much about it." "Dad," Mark shook his father's arm, tired of the boring talk that was going on. "Remember something." Realization and remembrance lit up on James' face. "Ah, Nat, honey, Mark and I are going down to the basement. This lucky little boy wants the entire thing to be his personal play area. Going to see how much work it'll need." Natalie looked at the two for a second before clearing up the plates. "Okay, but James, I need you here when the realtor comes." The basement was an absolute mess. It wasn't renovated like the rest of the house. Instead, it lay in a dilapidated, dated condition, smelling unpleasantly sulfurous. The beams above their heads were broken. The wooden stairs creaked suspiciously, and the air was thick and musty. It was mostly an empty place littered with random things like screwdrivers and saws, save for one corner which contained an oddly shaped object upon which was draped a large sheet. It was old and dusty, and the cobwebs that had been built on it showed that it hadn't been moved in a long time. James flexed his arms, preparing to clear out this one last piece of unimportant gunk once and for all. He smiled at his boy, who felt a little uneasy, but was immediately warmed by his dad's confidence. "Give me a hand, son," James said, lifting one corner of the dusty old thing. Mark lifted the other side abruptly, and they both tossed the sheet to the ground as a fury of disturbed flying critters and dust tornadoed around them for a few seconds before everything settled down. James stopped coughing as he set his eyes on the object below the sheet. He was eerily perplexed as his eyes scanned the last thing he'd expect to be below a brand new house, a fine wooden coffin. "What the heck, Dad?" Mark muttered, taking a step back. It was safe to say that the poor boy was scared beyond wits now, yet there was nothing he could do except shiveringly hold his father's hand for comfort. "Don't be afraid, son," James chuckled, faking confidence for the sake of his son. He didn't want to ruin the good mood at all. "It's probably empty. A lot of people used to make fine coffins back in the day. Someone probably forgot to kick out this one." "I don't like it, Dad," Mark replied. "Oh, don't be silly, my boy. Go fetch your dad a crowbar from near you. I'm pretty sure I saw one when we walked in." As Mark retrieved the rusty old crowbar and walked back to his father, he stared at the coffin. It seemed too new, too fresh, and too recently touched to be here. Hands shaking, he handed the tool to his father. "Good boy," James remarked. "Now I want you to step back while I pry this open, all right, boy?" "Good, just stand there." Like an idiot, James began to fidget with the crowbar, huffing and puffing to get a space between the opening. It was sealed very tightly shut indeed, James thought. A strong man like himself was unable to pry it open. Yet after a few minutes of using his manly muscles to pull the thing apart, the screws on the coffin popped off, shimmying into the air and landing in unknown places. The lid burst open as James and Mark stepped back, ill-prepared to witness the horror they would go through. Inside the coffin lay the dead body of a young man who was dressed in black pants and a white dress shirt. His arms were folded against each other as he lay lifelessly in his eternal abode. His skin was a nauseating shade of light marbled blue and purple, signifying the areas where the blood had settled down. "He died of cancer, Dad," Mark asked his father calmly, pointing towards the man's bald head and lack of eyebrows. The truth was, the boy was frightened beyond repair. He did not want to see his new forever home plagued by the dead odorous body of a man on the very first day. James did not reply. He was shocked and annoyed that his son had to see this too, yet he kept his calm composure. His mind relayed to far-fetched ideas as he imagined that this was the reason the realtor wanted to visit the place, to inform him safely about the dead body now that they had paid with an irreversible transaction. As James thought about how to proceed with this incident in a way that would not traumatize his son, his eye caught a movement in the open coffin. Startled, he pulled Mark back and stared at the change that had just gone about in this very old body. The eyes had opened as suddenly as a strike of lightning on a tree. They were slightly wrinkled, as if dehydrated, and purely black with a glimmer of silver in place of the irises. Slowly, the being moved his arms and lifted himself, his bones cracking nauseatingly. His chest made a wheezing, rattling noise, as if he hadn't used his lungs in a long time. He shivered, standing upright and staring at the father and son who had paused their breaths to stare at the horrific spectacle that was unfolding in front of their eyes. The creature gasped slowly, crouching down and opening its mouth a little too inhumanly wide. With a subtle, slick sound, two needle-sharp fangs popped out from behind the upper teeth of the dead being. Caw! The thing made a guttural, wheezy sound, clearly threatening the father and son. It stayed in a bizarre, crouched position for a while, its black and silver eyes focused on them, deducing the right time to pounce. James snapped out of his paralytic fright, a moment of clarity thankfully overtaking him. He roughly grabbed his still fear-stricken son and dragged him up the stairs, daring not to glance back in case he saw something that would make him lose any hope of escaping. Reaching the top, he slammed the door shut behind him in a hurry, pushing Mark forward into the living room. Natalie came bounding downstairs. "James, what's the matter?" "There's no time to explain." James sifted through the key holder for the car keys. "We need to get out of here immediately." "But James..." Her voice of reasoning was cut short by the sound of a loud bang emanating from the basement door. A cloud of dust shifted from the next corridor as James grabbed his family and rushed towards the front door. But that would not happen. While James had been searching desperately for his keys, the strange black humanoid creature had whizzed across the ceiling, crawling upside down like an otherworldly predator and erecting himself upright in front of the door that James desperately planned to escape from. "Daddy," Mark whispered fearfully, hiding behind him. "It's a vampire." At the child's remark, the dead creature bared his fangs and hissed, clearly pleased at his recognition. "You have woken me up from my deep slumber. For a long time I was bound to my coffin, dead and angry, but you have woken me. I am so hungry, child. What better than to snack on some blood, eh?" With that, the creature took a step forward, his fangs taut in his mouth, and his eyes zooming in on a thick, juicy vein at the bottom of Mark's neck. A fury of frightful nostalgia ran through James's mind as he spun through all the illogical myths he's heard as a child. Vampires, light, garlic, daytime. Aha! Striking the eureka moment, James grabbed his wife and son by the arm and dragged them to the sunroom, desperate to keep them away from the creature, who walked behind them slowly, taking its sweet time with a little smirk on his fanged mouth. "You shan't step in here," James yelled gleefully at the devilish humanoid. "Ha ha ha!" The vampire chuckled slowly, placing one foot slowly into the sunlight. James and his family watched him carefully, fully expecting him to burst into flickering flames. But that is not what happened. As the vampire stepped into the light, his dead foot fully in its usual state, the smirk never left the fiend's mouth. "What is the matter, human?" the vampire taunted James, frowning sarcastically. "Shocked? How? A man who believes the old wife's tales is a dead man indeed. Storybooks cannot inform you of all the horrors that delve under the happy facade of this world. Why hasn't the sunlight burned you?" James stuttered. "I am the original undead. The heat of the sunlight is good for us. It heats our dead stiff joints." The vampire closed his eyes and let the afternoon sun hit his skin. "See, it's actually the dreaded moonlight that brings about our absolute annihilation. You could say I'm a reverse vampire." Without even the slightest bit of warning, the dead humanoid jumped forward, plunging his needle-fine fangs deep into the collar of James, who fell backwards, the 2 puncture wounds spewing blood in spurts. He tried to push his son and wife away, back into the room, beckoning them to escape, but it did not work. As the incapacitated James lay in his growing pool of blood, the dead creature lunged on Mark and Natalie in a scurry of fangs and nails, scraping the flesh off any bones it came in contact with and draining the soupy blood out of their bodies. The large house echoed with the nauseating sound of bones snapping and crunching under the terror of the dead creature. Dreadful screams of pain were heard all across the street with no one to hear them. Bloody handprints were splattered all over the new furniture as Mark and Natalie tried to escape unsuccessfully. Through his darkening vision, James watched his wife and son being torn to shreds. And just like that, all turned silent as the sunroom died down in its activity, quietly declaring the brutal demise of James and his family. When all was said and done, Natalie's decapitated head wetly rolled across the corridor, her eyelids viciously ripped off, and her dead eyes gazing at nothingness through the bloody, clotted mess of her matted hair. The dead demon stood up, his mouth dripping with blood and bits of fat. His bloodthirsty eyes shone dangerously in the midday sun as he focused on a vehicle that had just stopped across the street. His bloody lips curled into a treacherous smile as he maliciously watched a family happily get out of their van into their forever home.